that's watching. Welcome to season two of Kojo's Corner. And it's just by sheer luck that the first episode of season two features Chris. The season one, the first episode featured Chris. So I think we have a pattern here. But it's great to have Chris join us on season two because lots is happening. It's budget season, and this year is very different than in prior years because of the strong mayor's power and some of the changes to municipal governance from the province. So in years past, to it, budget is going on. What are some of the things you feel is missing? We were at 14%. Now it's at 7.9. Bike lanes, police budgets, uh, whatever it is, I'm handing it over to you.
It is wonderful to be back again. This is, I always look forward to chatting with you. So it's awesome that we get to start off the season talking about really interesting and really intense discussions that are happening at the city right now. I think we cannot talk about the budget without talking about the changes that the province has made, the changes that they have forced on the city, and a lot of the spending that honestly is to make up for what the province isn't doing. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things right now. The fact that with the way that Doug Ford is running his government. I mean, we all know he wants to be the mayor of Ontario, right? Like he wants to stick his fingers into everything that's happening at the municipal level. And to do that, sometimes he delegates powers and gives responsibilities away. And so a lot of his legislative changes over the past little while have been to absolve him of responsibility and absolve the provincial government of responsibility for things and make municipalities pay for it. But as we all know, municipalities cannot spend and it cannot generate revenue the same way that the province can. So what he's doing is he's putting municipalities into an impossible position because he wants them to either take the blame for all of the tax increases or cut spending, which is what he would have done if he, became mayor of Toronto like he wanted anyway. And so now he's forcing municipalities to make these decisions. And frankly, it's a lot of municipalities are saying, no, we are going to continue to provide services, but we need to live with the reality that past councils have failed miserably when it comes to adequately funding things, doing necessary improvements to infrastructure, making sure that we have enough money in the bank so that when we have a cost of living crisis, we can continue to pay municipal staff effectively. Because let's look at council staff. These are folks who will help you with everything from your blue bin's gone missing, so they'll redirect you to that. You've got a problem with the sewer, in front of your house. There's a water main break. Something happens like that. They're there. They're ready. I know from experience working with Maureen Wilson's office. The folks in Maureen's office, Stephanie Hilson and Mary Louise Piggott, are there all the time, ready, waiting for any sort of thing that happens, and they deserve to be compensated for what they do. But we expect city hall staff to live on minimum wage but be at our beck and call 24/7, and that's not okay, right? So we need to effectively fund these things, and in order to do that, we're going to have to look at raising taxes. So when you get things like Ted McMeekin's 4% increase symbolic motion, it's really just populist gesturing in response to populist politics from the province. So honestly, there's a lot of really weird stuff going on.
Yeah, and you raised a comment. I think you've raised a couple of things, but I because I saw this on the news on CHCH where they said St. Catherine's, right, in 20 I think in 2023 they had a 10 like double digits property increase, but then this time around they've reduced it to a very single digit number, and the mayor was saying that look, the reason we were able to do that this year was because in the previous year we had a bigger threshold, so now we can reduce it. So this maybe it's a rhetorical question, but it's like, why is it that we're not seeing some of that thinking, right? And we end up just hearing the low taxes, low taxes, low taxes. I keep on saying, duh, everybody wants low taxes, but who is galvanizing people and explaining things to residents to understand where we are? The last piece I'll add, and maybe you can respond, is I think also during the season we tend to focus on councillors and the mayor, and I would argue that we should actually be focusing on MPPs, particularly those that are in government, because of all the provincial downloading that you talked about. So why is it that they can't come up with solutions, but they come up with political talking points?
Hmm. That is the age old question, or at least it seems to be that way. Honestly, this has only been something we've been dealing with for the past 30 years, right? This idea, voter turnout has declined at the municipal level to the point where it's only usually the most engaged or the most angry in our community who come out to vote, and so the politicians we have are responding to either of those groups, and it's a difficult balancing act because what they're looking at is 4 years down the road. How do I keep this seat? And sometimes the political calculus is, we can't look beyond those 4 years, which is why you're seeing a lot of outrage about the spending on the bike lane project. Because remember, a lot of that money has already been committed. And money is going to be coming from the province and from the federal government to
Yeah.
actually fund this. And it's $6 million a year over a period where we need to put strategic investments into active transportation so that we can reduce the strain on our roads. It's exactly what you say with St. Catharines, right? We put the investment in now, later down the road, we won't have to spend as much. Past
Mhm.
councils didn't do that because they were thinking about 4 years down the line. Now
Mhm.
we have a crop of councillors. We have incredibly forward thinking, intelligent, and dedicated councillors who are saying, we have been putting off spending. We have been passing the buck year after year after year. Now we need to sit down and honestly address the debts we have. Otherwise,
Mhm.
going forward, we're just going to keep doing this. And you can't do this in perpetuity, right? You
Mhm.
cannot continue to do this. And so it is in some ways the short-sightedness of politicians who are speaking to a smaller and smaller demographic. And then people like Donna Skelly and Neil Lumsden get off scot-free, and they can go
Mhm.
about their re-election campaigns in 2026 without worrying about any of this. Problem is,
Mhm.
in reality, they're the ones that voted to create the circumstances where the taxes have to go up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I've just put this screenshot up. I think to me, this screenshot is basically uh uh a telling of, if people say I want my taxes lowered, or we can't spend enough, like, this is the money right here. You have about 900 million or so related to employee related costs, contracts, material and supply, recoveries from capital, vehicle, all these things. So when I hear counselors like Matt Francis and others say, "Well, I want to lower the tax," I ask, where can you? The numbers are before you. So there's also a lack of counselors letting residents know what is going on. And I made this comment in my last episode in season one. I didn't see any counselor have a town hall meeting saying, "Hey, these are the things that we are prioritizing," or what are the things do you want to prioritize based on council's priorities, right?
Yeah.
I know that after the budget was released, now we have some counselors who have town halls. So I want to be fair, but my question to you is: are these town halls going to have the necessary impact? I'll just leave it there. I don't want to comment too much. Are these town
Yeah.
halls going to have the necessary impact?
I don't know. I think it's, a lot of what counselors have to do is, it's honestly, it's triage. You're doing what you can with what you got as quickly as you can to make sure that the issues that have been building for a long time are dealt with when they break, right? And these town halls, they are an opportunity sometimes for counselors to honestly walk people through the budgeting process, but I mean, we are looking at a municipal budget that is way outside the scope of what most people deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
We are not dealing with the amount of money, the billions of dollars that go into effectively running a municipality. And so these town halls, I mean, much like a lot of what happens, it's political theater. It's this
Mhm.
opportunity for you to gather a whole bunch of folks who are usually on your email list in a
Mhm.
room and then say, okay, go ahead, let's have a dialogue. Let's yell about the water fees, the stormwater fees. Let's yell about how much money is going to rebuild the washroom in Woodlands Park, but not really have a substantive conversation about any of the meaningful numbers. I mean, like what you showed, that's baffling for a lot of people, right? The amount of money that goes into this. The problem is sometimes when you look at those figures, the 900 million that goes towards staffing, you don't often see that these are humans, right? These are people who are working, who are then taking money and spending it in the local economy, who are, in buying homes, well, if they can, usually just paying mortgages on what they've got, or
Mhm.
they're contributing to the economy. And just like when John Tory was still the leader of the PCs, and then when Tim Hudak became the leader, right? They kept talking about reducing the size of the civil service because that'll bring taxes down. Sure, but then you're laying people off, and those folks then aren't putting money into the economy. You can create the conditions for a recession by
Mhm.
dabbling too much in that. And I think
Mhm.
what we need to do is honestly have that conversation. Realize that money, it's going to these folks and then it's coming back into our economy, right? It's all
Mhm.
circular. So I
Mhm.
think that's something that we forget sometimes.
Mhm. So, let's comment on one more thing, and then we're going to move into what I would say probably the most extensive written piece about politics on your publication. So, earlier on, I guess during budget season, there was a news article or story that we heard about, and it was from Councillor Matt Francis, and the Cole's notes was he was on a ride along. During the ride along, they had a visit at an encampment, and there was someone that was pregnant. They had to deliver the baby. That shook him.
Mm.
Again, paraphrasing here. I don't. and okay, well, let me just read it. Yeah, my heart goes out to the mother and any other mothers in a terrible situation, said Francis, a father of two. My heart goes out and breaks for children too that are born into the world that way. So fair enough. That's true. We all agree. But then his response was, and that's why we need to increase the police budget. And
Mm.
I think we can say that we can separate a police budget from an issue that's happening in an encampment. And to me, and I think for others, it's like, well, if someone is giving birth at an encampment, the solution to that is not to say increase the police budget. It's probably many things, right? Just thinking off the top of my head, what about it if we know there are any pregnant women in encampments or pregnant people in encampments, let's give them priority on the shelter list. I think that makes sense, right? So what when you read this, what was your take, or what did you think about the whole thing?
Yeah, when I read this, I realized I missed it by that much. Just he came so close. It's incredible that he was able to see this and was able to express a considerable amount of empathy for folks in these situations, but remaining completely committed to an enforcement first approach. It does a disservice not just to the folks who are in these situations, but to the police themselves and to every other first responder. I know I have heard from individuals who work with people who are experiencing homelessness or near to experiencing homelessness or have, and they say oftentimes the police are not trained to deal with some of the complicated situations that are going on. Social workers are trained, sometimes paramedics and other folks with medical training are trained, and he talks about here how it was paramedics that ended up helping, but oftentimes the police can get in the way because they're looking for a crime that has been committed so that they can justify being there, right? And if you're getting in the middle of life-saving medical services, or if you're getting in the way of somebody who's finally had a breakthrough with a social worker or a therapist or somebody who's able to help them work through the issues that they're dealing with, you can send that person right back into the same cycles that caused them to be in these positions in the first place. And so I feel like the best way that we can ensure our communities are safety for people living in encampments, people who live near encampments, and for police themselves, is by taking the resources we have, diverting them to programs that will help people, and make sure that we have, instead of enforcement first, housing first, medical care first, mental health care first. These are what we really need to see. And for him to say, this is why we need to give the Hamilton Police Service more, it just shows that he's responding to concerns in the community that equate police with safety. Because remember, police respond when something has already gone wrong. And what we need to do is prevent things from going wrong in the first place. You can prevent somebody from having to give birth in a tent in the cold by
Mhm.
ensuring that there's housing, by ensuring that there is enough space in the adequate facilities so that they can get the health care and the respect and the dignity that they deserve. It really has just missed it by that much. Just so close. He's on the right track, but
Mhm.
a little bit
And
of a overshot.
and you know the part that's very ironic. This is the same counselor that said he wanted to create a registry where residents could take in and comment neighbors, and I'm like, it, it, I just don't get it. And in the piece, he also says he saw all of this, and this has led him to more reflection. And I'm like, yo, you ran for city council. It's not that during that time there wasn't a housing crisis, right? So things have been going on. Then now you go into a situation and see how dire it is for vulnerable people, women, children, babies. And now you're like, cool, I'm going to go home. I'm going to reflect and more money for policing. Peace out. My job is done. And let me even add, and now there are parking lots in his ward. People want to build housing. He's like, nah, I ain't having that. It's like
It is straight from the populist playbook. And that's why I I referred to him as Hamilton's own version of Ron DeSantis, right? Using people as pawns to suit a political aim, and it's not okay. Like, great that you went on the ride along. It's that you saw these things, but come on, man, like you have to recognize that it's human beings you're talking about, and
Yeah.
you can't turn the community against them. You can't say, no, we're not going to build social housing that's supposed to be for people in these situations because you want to protect a parking lot.
Yeah.
You can't. And the registry, again, the fact that he took an angry Facebook comment and almost made it policy, that is it is practically disqualifying from being in public office at that, right? It's just so close but so far away.
Yeah. So that segues us into a detailed. This is your research chops on display right here. A detailed analysis or investigation piece. I don't know now. Whether you are an investigative journalist now or
Oh no,
so.
I don't have the stomach to be a proper journalist. I all respect to the real journalists in the city. I can't.
Yeah.
Good.
So I was very intrigued about your write up, and I had noticed the group on Twitter. At first, when someone says concerned citizens, you're like, yeah, lots of people are concerned. But I did some digging and I came to the same conclusion as you, and I just left it. I didn't wanna say anything, do anything. But can you just give us an assessment of what you found and what you think is particularly maybe concerning, or what is like, what's going on here? Because I think a comment you made was like, these folks have literally just spent like 20K promoting things that are probably, again, not factual, just engaging in like emotional frustration against certain counselors. And I think in your piece you talked about how they were going after Counselor Danko, and others. So yeah, well, can you expand for people that even may not know that this group exists?
Yeah, for folks that aren't reading the print edition of the Spectator, or didn't get the the any of the suburban papers back when they still existed, the Dundas Star, the Hamilton Mountain News, all those ones to their door, they might not have seen what looked like ransom notes. For weeks in the paper, a full quarter page, and those ads are expensive. A quarter page railing against everything from the mayor's trip to Italy, which again at $4,600 was a steal. That is you cannot get a vacation like that. So that was incredible. But they talk about speculative numbers on tax increases. They were talking about the public school board and the trustee communication policy. They talked about everything under the sun, and they blamed the current council for it. They even had the audacity to claim that there was corruption from the municipal election because people who donated to councillors then had LRT stops
Yes.
favorably put near their homes. But we all know that those stops have been planned for years. Like we anybody who's engaged and has been following this knows that that's been happening. And this group called themselves Concerned Hamiltonians. A nice,
Yeah.
ambiguous-ish sounding name. But as I pointed out in my piece on my newsletter, it's actually a callback to Concerned Citizens for Hamilton, a slightly pro-business but mostly pro-reform council group that existed in 1985, and they
Yeah.
wanted to change the composition of city council because they didn't agree with the direction of things. And so
Mhm.
this is a callback to that, but this is just pure populist nonsense.
Mhm.
They would spew facts that were borderline misinformation. They
Mhm.
would make claims that were outlandish, blaming the current city council for things like the Red Hill Valley Expressway inquiry, which was something from the last
That's
council.
yeah.
Yeah, and they were absolutely obsessed with the the landlord licensing pilot program in wards 8, 14, and 1, so around Mohawk and McMaster. It's a pilot program that costs landlords for the first year $700 extra a year for all the fees. And then the next year it's about $400. They are just obsessed with this. They have blamed everything in the city on this thing, from homelessness to increased housing prices to, you name it. And they seem to be really obsessed with JP Danko, Andrew Horvath, obviously, but they also reserve a lot of their online hate for councillors like Maureen Wilson and Narendra Nan, progressives, and obviously Cameron Crutch, because as one of the unofficial spokespeople of the progressive movement in the city, Cameron is an easy person for angry right wingers to go after. So I thought this was a very bizarre group, and I wanted to know a little bit more. So I did some digging, and through contacting some folks at Metroland, which still runs the advertisements for the spec, and doing some digging through their social media, I found they spent over $21,000 on advertisements outside an election period to influence things that are happening in the city. This is American style dark money all over the place. This is money, and just for folks who don't know, light money is money that is subject to sunlight, to the scrutiny of the public. It's things you'll see in campaign finance records, a lot of the work that I do on donation records. But this is shadowy, secret money that you don't know where it's coming from. And so I was particularly concerned that there are likely very rich interests in the city who are putting out this very amateurish right-wing populist campaign to try to convince us that things that aren't happening are happening, and to try to scare councillors into changing things. I thought it was just bizarre.
Yeah, and I think one of the comments you made too was that the difference here is that concerned citizens for Hamilton in 85, they were public, so you knew who was affiliated with it. And if you want to include other third party folks, they were also public, whether it was through their donations or who contributed, right? If you want to include the I elect folks too, that's also public, right? So why do you think, and maybe this is yeah, it might be easy, why do you think they haven't been public?
Well, groups like Workers Vote for Change, and even the Campaign Life Coalition. I mean, you can disagree with the movement and disagree with their aims, which I certainly do in terms of the Campaign Life folks, but they are transparent. They tell you where the money is coming from, where it's going. They have spokespeople. The Concerned Citizens for Hamilton in 1985. They were very active in civic affairs, and they had a whole host of people who, were interviewed by The Spectator, who were very forward with who they were. They were transparent. They wanted people to know because they were proud to put their names behind this. This, on the other hand, it seems like they almost want to be mysterious. They want to be in the background. And likely in this case, it's because it's actually a very small group, if not just one person, pretending like they're a bigger group. On Facebook, they have 3 followers. Twitter and Instagram, I mean, you would have a very difficult time, putting together even a decent board game night with all these people. Though I certainly wouldn't want to play board games with them. They seem like they'd be not very fun to play with. But it would be a very difficult time to make the case that this is somehow a movement of the silent majority. That's something you hear hard right folks talk about all the time, that they're part of the silent majority, which is right-wing code for, I don't have the backing of the majority, but I want people to think like I do. Right. Even if you look at the current ideological makeup of Canadians, people who would believe this kind of stuff, they're still in the minority, but they have the bluster and bravado and the money to make it look like they're much bigger than they are. So honestly, I think this is a campaign by either a very small group of people or one person who's particularly opposed to certain things the city is doing and wants to make it look like it's a grassroots organization so they can scare councillors into giving them the policies they want or convince voters that there's more anger toward the incumbent councillors than there actually is. So
Yeah, it's very interesting, and particularly with Hamilton, when you think about the history of Hamilton, particularly as it relates to municipal. And I think you talked about it where for a period of time you had NDP councillors and then now the switch to business folks or more a different type of governing system, right? And 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 now to see something like this, it's very interesting. So maybe let me continue by asking this. Obviously, there are conservative folks, there are what red Tories, and whatever progressive people. Again, I don't like those terms, but you taught me, or you have made it known that whether you like it or not, it exists. So I gotta get to it. So how do you see things playing out based on these kind of uh, rudimentary categorizations, if we can say so, right? Because I think something is happening. Because you take somebody like, and you mentioned it in your piece here, the former CFL player who was a federal conservative candidate at one point. Like, how do you see it happening? Because I think there are certain things that are bubbling up in the city that maybe people that don't pay attention will not know, but I think it's still happening, right? So
mhm.
where do you think we're going? Because when you look at folks that are connected to the Conservative Party, whether federal or provincial, the fact that we're seeing property taxes increase, that's their rallying cry to say, hey, what's going on? So how do you see that working or playing out in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's all. This is speculative, of course, because had you asked anyone in 2018 how things would go, they would probably give you a straight shot answer, and then boom, pandemic, right? Things can always change.
Yeah,
But with this, I feel like
yeah.
this has happened frequently in the city's history, and honestly, in municipalities across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Every time people who really want substantive change get involved at the local level. You saw this in the late 1800s into the 1900s when workers groups started to form. Then you saw it
Yeah.
in the 40s when the CCF, the forerunner to the NDP, started to get involved. And then again in the 70s and 80s when the NDP was involved. Every time you see people who want to change things, could even just be, unaffiliated folks who want to stop the destruction of a particular community. You saw that in Toronto with the people who opposed the Spadina Expressway. You saw it in Hamilton with people who opposed the destruction of Strathcona. These sorts of uh, groups that want to change the discussion, where they want to have a different way of governing things. The people who are in power, who stand to make money from the way the municipality works, they will oppose them with everything they've got. They will
Mm-hmm.
stand up. They will put as many candidates up against them as possible. And what you're seeing right now is a new age of progressive politics in municipalities. In places like Ottawa and Toronto, you have Horizon Ottawa, Progress Toronto. You've got
Mm-hmm.
these organized groups of people who are keeping progressives organized between elections
Mm-hmm.
about municipal affairs. And they're drawing in people from the Greens, from the New Democrats, from the Liberals, unaffiliated people.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to see the right oppose this because they stand to benefit from the way the municipality works as it is. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same reason that all the people that were involved in the development industry in Hamilton were either connected either through 1 or 2 degrees of association to all the people who were involved in the Greenbelt scandal. right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because they can make money from the way the city is working now. And so what they're going to do
Mm-hmm.
is try to oppose things. And they know that the positions they take may not be the most popular. A lot of people have a problem with urban sprawl. A lot of people have a problem with car centricity, with the destruction of the environment, with municipalities that seem to work better for developers than everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that selling the status quo to people, that's not going to fly. And so what you need is something fun, something big, something dynamic to get people engaged. And so you see these people rallying against taxes, rallying against some of the more extreme ones, rallying against wokeness, against municipalities that take a stand on the current conflict in Israel, Gaza. You're seeing a lot of opposition to things that aren't necessarily what the day-to-day responsibilities of a counselor are, because it's something that they can go knock on doors and say, you angry about this? Are you
Mm-hmm.
angry about a woke city council ruining your Santa Claus parade? Didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen, not going to happen. It's not a real thing, but it's something that they can make people mad about. And they
Mm-hmm.
know that anger does two things in an election. Anger motivates people who are already angry and turns everyone else off.
Mm-hmm.
Negative advertisements do that excellently. They
Mm-hmm.
make your electorate smaller. And that's what the right wants to do. They want to make people mad, and they don't want people voting. Because when
Mm-hmm.
more people vote, they lose.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's an interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And I look at uh the vacant tax fiasco.
Yeah.
And most of the folks that were against it are like, hey, this is another tax, people are going to be angry. And I think it was a couple of counselors. I won't mention names. We know who they are. There was an argument about, they are seniors in my area, and they won't be able to decipher what's going on. And I'm like, why is it that these folks always pick and choose things, but they don't have the whole picture, right? Because when it comes to snow clearing, I don't see those same people saying, "Well, there are seniors in my area and they need their sidewalks cleared, because who's going to clear the sidewalk for them and put the salt on it to make sure nobody falls down?" Right? Like
Yeah.
they pick and choose. And I think it was Dr. Zachary Spicer that gave the great example of, like, these people know how to play on people. When people are like, you need to increase my taxes, they are like, oh, I'm working on it, man. Things are tough. I'm the only guy there. Not everybody's on the same page. Then when it's lower my taxes, they're like, well, I'm fighting. It's the woke people and the progressive people. They like tax and spend, tax and spend. you know. So
Um,
I find it like they are urgent issues the city is facing, but then we end up doing these. I think you mentioned it, political theater, and then we end up not making a decision, and then we are back again, right? And everybody gets angry, right? Which is what you are saying drives the way people vote, right? And the way people couch what it is they are going to be talking about. So
yeah.
let's finish off. We have about 20 minutes or so. Where do you see this budget discussion going? As I said, there are a couple of town halls coming up. I'm not here to promo anybody's town hall. You can contact your own counselor and figure out if they are having a town hall or not. But some are happening in the next 2 weeks or so before February 15th. How do you see this eventually shaping out?
How do I see it shaping up? That is, again, honestly anyone's guess. And I think there are some moving pieces that still need to be considered. Um, Cameron Crutch is taking a really firm stance on the police budget. And that's something that, if we're looking at places where we can find efficiencies, that's a great one we can start with, right? You have to ask how many police officers are on paid leave. Do we need to be paying as much for all these different things as possible? Can we not find a more efficient way of doing things? So I think there are going to be some discussions about that. And I think there are going to be some broader discussions, probably driven by the right, on some things that they can cut. Right, where can we cut from when, and what's going to cause the least pain? What I'd like to see is Mayor Horvath taking more of an approach like Mayor Olivia Chow is in Toronto, going to the province, going to the federal government, saying, "Look, you're making us deal with all these things. Now is the time to actually give us the cash." I think the opportunity for that might have passed. Unfortunately, Olivia hit the ground running when she was elected. She just started, developing the plans she knew she was going to have to develop, because she's somebody who has always been dismissed by the political establishment as a radical dreamer. But she came forward with costed, effective, efficient plans, and has spoken with the necessary levels of government to get this going. I mean, there was a little bit of a battle where, your tax increase is going to be this or this, extra amount if the federal government doesn't provide money for housing. I think the opportunity for that has passed in Hamilton. So realistically, what I see happening is, 1,000 little cuts happening all over the place, but cuts that won't necessarily get us to the point we need to be at for a lot of people to be satisfied. So there's going to be a lot of debate. There's going to be a lot of dialogue, and unfortunately, a lot of political theater. Like today, like all the motions that are going to come forward that aren't really anything, but that make councillors who might be a little bit more squeamish when it comes to talking to their constituents about these things, might make them feel a little bit better. But realistically, we're looking at a substantial increase, not the increase that we need to prevent a similar increase next year. So I feel like everybody is going to come away from this discussion a little bit madder than they were before.
And how, like, do you like this budget process better than the previous budget process?
I think only a couple rounds of this will help me to effectively determine which one's better. I think we need to keep doing this a couple more times. I think there are always ways you can improve. More consultation with the community on things is important, so that we get a broader array of perspectives when it comes to what we're spending money on. If you were to give people the figures as to what a department gets, how much they're asking for extra, and why they're asking for that, I'm sure you'll get really interesting opinions. We've moved away from, in the city, councillors embarking on participatory budgeting, right?
Yeah.
That was something that happened in Ward 1 under Brian McCaddy, and to his credit, Ward 2 under Jason Farr for a very brief period of time. And I feel like if we engaged people more on that level, even if it was just a very small percentage of the budget, then we could increase the corporate financial literacy of folks, to use sort of a convoluted term. But we need people to be more aware of exactly how much things cost and how long it takes to get things done, in order for a more interactive budgeting process to be effective. So I'm waiting to see what happens, but I don't know. The budget process has always been confusing, for everybody. You could have a a PhD in municipal finance and still find it confusing. I don't, because that's a little more money sided for me. But honestly, somebody who does look at this, there are some times when I look at those figures and go, what, how, where, why?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah. Your talk about participatory budgeting. I want to let's stay on that a little bit because I think at the end of the day, that should be the future, right? Like, because this thing where, Mike Zagaric is seen as the financial wizard, he goes into hiding for like 8 months, crunches all the numbers, shows up. Hey, and man, the guy knows his stuff. I'm just saying, it just looks like that, It's like, Mike, go do your thing. He shows up, and the first time he presents it is like, whoa, watch out, double figures. But stay tuned, part two, you know? And then we part two, numbers are down. Stay calm, right?
Yeah,
Um, and then you have the two opportunities for residents to come in and say whatever they want to say. I feel like you know, that has also become like a political theater thing because it's like the councillors are there. It's like from 3 to like whatever time. They're like, yeah, you guys say whatever you want to say. We already decided what's going on. We don't know what you guys are complaining about, but we'll listen to you. Don't worry. We're here for you. Right? So if we were to expand participatory budgeting, how do you think that will enhance the budget process? And are there any examples outside of Canada?
yeah, there's some really great examples. I mean, the city of Porto Alegre in Brazil is kind of where everything started, but they do this in a lot of places in a lot of bigger cities in the States. There's a participatory budgeting process in New York City and in Chicago that are actively, people love getting involved in that. There are some folks who that's their whole thing.
Mhm.
And I think it's because it's it breaks down those barriers that you talked about, right? Like, Mike Zagaric, a very qualified civil servant,
Yeah.
but there's a disconnect between the expertise and then the people, right? And we need to balance that. That's exactly the same kind of thing they teach you in planning school, right? You have to balance the expertise that you have with the needs and wants of the people. It can't be all one or all the other. And so what you need to do is come to an agreement and an understanding and work collaboratively with people who know the figures, the finances, where things are going, and people who have the on the ground lived experiences. And that's, kind of what I raised earlier. It's like 900 million for staffing
Mhm.
seems abstract.
Mhm.
Then you think about it from the perspective of people, right? So participatory budgeting can help take a complicated uh, and often very bureaucratic and very, legally confusing thing, and open it up to the people. When I was involved with the Ward 2 project, it was on the urging of my friend and colleague Norman Kearney, who's the one who's behind everything. He organized these sessions where you'd have city staff come in and talk to people in the community about, okay, so you want a community garden, here are the steps to getting it. Oh, you want improvements to the rec center, here's how we get that.
Mhm.
It is a way of bringing the abstract to the people, right? Because not everyone has the ability or interest or, the resources to commit to getting a master's degree in urban governance.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it doesn't mean we're all not still citizens
Mhm.
and still have the desire to get engaged in our community. So to be able to sit down with regular everyday folks from all different walks of lives and to have conversations about the complicated but still very real financial decisions that we as a municipality make. I think that's something that's really important. If every councillor committed to doing a participatory budgeting project, it was even 1% of the municipal budget, that could fundamentally reorder how we as a municipality talk about these things.
Mhm.
So it's not just the folks who have the time to go and delegate. It's not just the folks who can pay advertising people or have $20,000 lying around to run ransom notes in the Spectator every week. So that's not just people who have those resources, but everybody that can get involved. And I think participatory budgeting could be revolutionary in the best possible way
Mhm.
for a city like Hamilton.
Yeah. Yeah, you talking about that just reminded me of someone. I won't mention their name. I didn't get permission, but I can say what they said. Someone suggested, they're like, how come? And I'm not asking you to answer, but they just made this point, and it made me really think. It's the person was saying, how come counselors don't have town halls together, right? Like,
Mm.
you know, uh, uh, one, two, and I'm just saying numbers. Nobody at me, right? Like downtown, all of you get together, and even I think it also breaks this mystic thing of I'm ward this. That person is ward this, and this happens in ward this, and this doesn't happen in ward. Like if you had all the mountain councillors or all the Ancaster or neighboring councillors or all the Stony Creek councillors saying, "Hey, let's host a thing and let's talk about. Okay, you all, we're here. What do you wanna see? What we're at your disposal here. Tell us, right? But it's like doesn't happen. Everybody does their own thing. Then they go to the table. Then they are arguing. Then one is saying, cut this. One is saying, don't cut this. But they are like, you all are neighboring people. Right? But anyways, I thought it was interesting for that person to raise that point. It's like what like we talk about saving money, right? So why don't you all just get into one place and then we save money on all of you doing your individual town halls. But anyways, what do I know? I'm just a guy who's on a podcast talking to another guy who writes a newsletter. So we don't know anything, right? So um so your response to that, if you have any.
Uh, I think I heard somewhere, and I can't remember who told me, but very recently, Alex Wilson and Craig Kassar hosted a joint town hall on a road project, but it was a very specific kind of thing because it was a road that ran through and I think bordered both of their wards.
Hmm.
But I think it would be a good opportunity to have conversations about because there are a lot of things that we in Ward 1 have in common with Ward 2. I mean, I can see Ward 2 from my kitchen window, to do a
Yeah.
Sarah Palin. But and I and Ward 13 is it's a stone's throw away, right?
Yeah.
So do we could have conversations between all of these wards. The problem is you run the risk of the encampment meetings happening again,
Yeah.
right? When the mountain encampment meeting was chaos, and it
Yeah.
was taken over by politically motivated folks. And the downtown one was a little bit less chaotic, but it was more managed, and so I feel like a lot of folks felt like they didn't have the same voice
Hmm.
in the downtown meeting. So I mean, there's I've I have advocated for the creation of community councils in wards,
Hmm.
having not just a ward counselor, but then 5 or 6 or 7 community counselors in different neighborhoods who can then, collect the opinions of their neighbors and bring it up to the counselor. And this is something that they do in places like Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., where it's difficult for folks to get in touch with the counselor directly. And so it's a better way to actually to have that kind of conversation. But that's that would be a tough sell
Hmm.
for a lot of people, and I feel like there's something really cathartic about going to a public meeting and venting your frustration. But I think there are ways to do it effectively.
Hmm.
It's something you'd have to figure out and sit down and plan.
Hmm.
And some counselors are certainly better than that at that than others.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get you out of here with this last one. So again, those that are watching or those that watch this later on, please check out the Sewer Socialists.ca. lots of writing and reading, but it's, trust me, it is very interesting reading. You know, what is it? I got to see a picture, an old picture of Terry Cook, who was, yeah, who was endorsed by the concerned citizens of, and it's nice to also see some of the names, right? Like I've read a lot about Geraldine Corpse, right? Like just seeing some of this in real time and trying to connect it with what's happening. And look, hey, I was like, there's Don Ross. I know Don Ross. So it's fun. I like to have fun sometimes. It's your writing is very interesting, and I think the key thing is it brings history, brings it into what we are seeing right now, and it's fun. So for those of you, the Sewer Socialists.ca. Check it out. Subscribe, right? And then that way, when it's out, you get it right into your inbox. Get a coffee, relax, and do some nice reading and learning. So, what are you writing next? What are some of the things that you're thinking about writing? Give us a preview. I can say, you only get a preview on Kojo's Corner.
That's true. Yeah, you usually don't give folks a preview, so this is exclusive
Yeah.
to everyone watching and listening. Yeah, I'm working right now on some of the. There is a lot of heated rhetoric around uh, international students, and that's something I'm kind of writing about. A lot of people are blaming newcomers and international students for the housing crisis, but I think that's way off.
Mhm.
I'm also looking at the police board, some of the recent changes and the membership. That's something that's going to come up in the future. But there are some other things that I've kind of got in the back of my head, sort of bubbling. I'm also always looking for, if somebody thinks that something is big and has been missed by any of the other outlets, I'd love to hear from folks, and I'd be more than happy to do a little bit of research. I mean, I got to put this PhD to good use somehow, right? So, and until somebody hires me at a university, this
Yeah.
is this is what I'll be doing. So, it's all free. So.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. And my last comment, because I know maybe this individual might be watching. A big shout out to Mark Anderson. Mark Anderson wrote a very great piece, responding to the money for the bike lanes. And I just wanted to, if you haven't read it, if you haven't checked it out, read it, just yeah, read it. It's very important to hear from other people. So just want to say big shout out to Mark. I know sometimes he watches this, and it was great to see his opinion piece, and it speaks to what, Chris, you also say all the time. I think people need to start sending in opinion pieces, because we read some of the stuff that Scott Radley writes, and he can write whatever he wants, but sometimes I think it lacks some nuance. Whereas you read a piece from Mark, you are getting some of that nuance that is lost in some of the very cliquey and political talking point opinion pieces that we get. So if you haven't, please read it. If you're following this on Twitter, I might add it as a thread on YouTube. I will post the link, and hopefully you can check it out. So that is us. Next month we're doing a full-on Black History Month edition of Kojo's Corner. So we'll be talking to lots of Black community members. There are lots of events that are happening at McMaster in the city. February 1st, the city is going to be launching Black History Month with the Hamilton Black History Council, and honoring one of the prominent Black community members here in Hamilton. So if you want to know who it is, come down to City Hall February 1st, 12 o'clock, and you'll find out there's also the John C. Holland Awards that will be happening on February 24th that honors the legacy of the Reverend John C. Holland and supporting Black youth across the city. So those are some of the events I'll be highlighting, some of the people I'll be highlighting. The great thing is I'll be doing episodes every Friday, 5 to 6. Every Friday, 5 to 6. So, if you want to learn lots and see what others are doing, tune in. So for now, thank you very much. A big shout out to Chris for joining us again. Who knows? He will bring him back. First episode of season 3.
I'm looking forward to it. I'll put it in my calendar.
Okay, see you all. Thank you for joining Kojo's Corner, right at the intersection of people, participation, power, and politics. See you soon.